So 15 minutes to talk about everything in the AI transformation. You can see the slides. I'm just going to say a few words on each slide. So I have about 15 of those. But previously, to understand where I come from, the moderator already said it. My co-founder is one of the globally leading AI scientists. The Human Brain Project had 1 billion euros in funding for figuring out how can we replicate the human brain. I personally have contributed to some of the best robots in the world. I've driven autonomously with self-created software on 3 continents, made some of the best insurance and pharmacy systems in the past, and then we took a step back and asked ourselves, how can we do it in half the time? And this escalated a little bit, and in the end we were asking, how can we go from autonomous cars to autonomous companies where the human still gets to decide everything they want, but a lot of stuff happens automatically. So I start the clock for 15 minutes, and I want to talk a little bit about the challenges in doing that. A lot of companies are doing one use case. So yesterday you were asked who is already doing something with AI. But if you're doing one thing with AI, how long will it take until you do everything with AI? So scaling the AI-based working model into a new way of working that is everywhere. So instead of doing one thing with AI and 99 things you do without AI, you do 99 things with AI and only one thing is not AI supported. That's actually hard because there's very little experience in doing that. And it's also not the thing that Google and Microsoft and so on are doing now. It's what they will be doing in a couple of years, because it's at the very forefront of technology. There are a lot of concerns about privacy and security. Are you even allowed to do this? Is it compatible with the European AI Act? Normally it's not a blocker, but you have to be smart about how you work in order to be compliant as well. There are at least 8,000 AI startups and a lot of big companies also working with AI, but how many of those are the right partners for this? And what's actually the right business model? So in practice, a lot of companies suffer from getting isolated AI islands that in the end will not grow into a big picture. And you're missing synergies and you have duplication, and innovation is much slower than it could actually be. And we are continuously reinventing things that have already been discovered in the past. So this question that you just had about if you would be training with previous data that contains lots of errors with people making wrong decisions, you find tons of papers on that in the autonomous driving space. Because if you record how people are driving, they drive across red traffic lights, they accelerate when they should not. So thousands of scientists have put a lot of thinking into that. The AI revolution actually started in the 1950s. Yeah, so we've been going at this for more than 70 years at this point. And it's smart to look at the systems that have already achieved a high degree of autonomy and then take what works. But looking at the car companies, it's not even working there. So they are very good at developing the autonomous cars, but not at scaling the same technology into the automation of the business. I helped, for example, create this little tiny robot here, 500 kilograms heavy, very powerful motors, safety certified, same as you do with the cars. We already have AI systems to which we provide a lot of trust in their decision making because engineers have figured out how to do that. But the question is, how do we really scale it to the company level? So how do we get something that integrates seamlessly as a new AI layer, provides us enhanced automation, but does this in a scalable approach across the whole organization, so it's actually future-proof? There's a growing understanding that perhaps company architectures will be looking a little bit different in the future. So we will not just have the classical ERP system, SAP and so on, CRM, customer relations management, document management systems, etc. And then other people hand programming all the business logic in between. But we are expecting that we will be seeing a more agentic approach, not just AI agents. There's also classical software involved. We do not have to do everything with AI now, but we should not do manually what we can do automatically with AI already. So already introduced myself. What we did is we just took our series development teams out of the autonomous driving space, and we threw all our capacity over the last years at this problem. How do we scale it to the company level? And at this point, we have been spending about 60 person years on the problem. We created a really easy to use whiteboard solution, a little bit like Miro, but different, where Miro is created such that the human does all the work. In principle, we come from exactly the other way around and ask ourselves, how can the AI be an equal level player that is actually supposed to bring energy into the system, make it such that things are also moving if the human is not actively pushing it, because the AI is much better at doing that than we are. It never gets tired. So we bring people into these whiteboard systems, we give them tools to experiment, we build a community around that. The idea of AI champions and so on is a very strong one. And then we start circling this around the company. So we try to make a big roadmap that says, okay, how do we get closer to the picture, but we still pick individual use cases. We onboard and train the users, try to play to the idea that convenience beats everything. So people complain, they say, wow, another tool, and does AI even work? But as soon as they are working with it and they see that it's actually helpful, and they think, wow, if I don't use AI, then I have to do all this myself again, suddenly the change resistance becomes much smaller. And with this, we are working in the direction of saying, realize short-term potentials where we get 30% to 80% effort reductions across a wide variety of use cases. I don't just do one, I have dozens of AI use cases in production with partner companies, and they also have a positive return on investment. But this is how the Americans talk. Yeah, so I will be at the SXSW conference from Friday in Texas. And there is a huge gap between the German communication and the American communication, also the Chinese communication. So while we are very skeptical about new technology in general, more than we maybe should be, the Americans say things like, if AI thinks 20,000 times as fast as a human, and if we can put whole companies on top of the AI to have everything AI supported, while the humans guide the energy, we may get companies that have 20 times to 50 times the output of today's Google or Apple company, which would be insane. And then the people say, maybe that's just 5 years away. So this is why AI is so threatening. If you don't participate this, you are gone in a couple of years. May take a bit longer, be a bit shorter, but this is a threatening competitive advantage. This is already so good, you can people question if it can be true, right? But it's measured. So this should be done in any case, but if this is possible to achieve, it's huge. So at this point, I have processed 50,000 industrial requirements. I've conducted 20,000 AI-based customer processes. I've handled about 1,000 text requests and did about 50,000 financial bookings in tests, and the numbers are increasing and the results are really good across the board. In some of the good use cases, the expert humans really only just change 10% of the remaining decisions. So 90% you say, you look at the AI result and you're like, that looks good, I like it, just submit it. 10% of the changes you say, no, I need to actually have a completely different opinion from what the AI is doing. And with that, you become relatively fast. At this point, I've done that in every department that a company typically has. So we have use cases in coming from the basic communication, routing all of the incoming emails and so on into the right business cases. We do things like taking 1.5 million incoming communication documents and mapping them on about 800 different types of business processes. That is impossible if every one of these 800 types of business processes becomes a 6-month project. You will need much longer than time is available to complete this. We have all the basic stuff, OCR and the general Gen AI things that we like to provide, but we go from sales over training, over contract management, over all these legal aspects with reach and roles, supplier management, operate whole standards with AI, and start to relieve the classical CRM and DMS and so on systems, or sometimes also replace them. I like this use case of operating the standards because everybody complains about it. I was at the Weltmarktführergipfel in Baden-Württemberg a few weeks ago, and the CEO of Trumpf complained that they are drowning in this regulation reporting, and she requested that we all just work more in order to deal with it, because there was no convincement that politics would make this any easier. We could get rid of all the regulation, theoretically, but we will not do it. We will be adding more and more and more on top of what we already have. However, what really happens if you take a whole standard and you try to operate it through AI? It's a really hard use case, because a standard with 200 requirements, for example, combines a lot of use cases that you have to execute in order to really move the standard ahead. But last year this was theory. This year we have it in production with a big retail company in Germany as well. And it's beautiful. You take the camera, you walk around the facility, you compare all the video data against the requirements, you identify the gaps, you have the AI close the gaps that it can close on its own. You have the AI propose to close gaps that it cannot close on its own. And while you're doing that, you're even saving money because you're taking old IT systems that you can be happy that they work at all because this is only held together by glue and strings. If you can take a couple of those and replace them with the AI system, you're saving millions and at the same time making a big jump to the forefront of the AI transformation because you can skip certain parts of the digitalization at this point. So we think we have created something that still has a long way to go. There are some levels for how people define the progress in AI in the USA, where the first levels contain basic AI application, using agents and so on, then doing innovation. And at the very end, at level 5, similar to the autonomous driving, people say you have AI that does work on the level of organizations and companies. So this is the hardest thing that AI companies are aiming for. And it will take a longer time to really put a whole company on the AI. But for quickly deploying and combining individual use cases into something that is growing together into a solution that can even operate certain aspects of holdings and so on, make life much easier for the administration and the productive parts of the company. We've made great progress. And with that, I can only highly encourage you to take this very, very seriously. Don't think so much about the fear. Not so much thinking about, oh, will AI take away our jobs or will it be somehow bad? But instead just doing proper engineering and making sure that we create systems that are beneficial for society and that make us competitive globally. Because I can tell you that the acceptance for these ideas in China and the USA is very, very strong. And the skepticism in Germany is still too big. So, however, when you work with the systems, it's beautiful. So just for fun, it will already be done, but it's also economically necessary. Thank you very much.
You're a fast speaker too, so we still have a little bit of room. Any immediate questions? Yes, Niels, you're fast. Always fast.
Great presentation. I would like to have a follow-up session with you actually to understand this more. But my comment is, since you spent some time thinking about the future and understanding how to make it feasible also with technology and so on, when do you think I think back then it was called the DAO, Digital Autonomous Organization, becomes a new normal? You said something a couple of years, but do you have something in your mind? And probably the new normal is depending on company, on continent and culture. So let's say China, USA, Germany. When is a new normal?
So I was also at the Weltmarktführer-Gipfel. I had the honor to talk with the CEO of a 120,000 people company, and he asked me exactly this question. And it's a really, really hard question because it depends on so many parameters. My careful answer was 5 years for selected companies. And in this case, for selected companies, is a bit of a problem because companies can eat market share of other companies. So if you would not be among the companies that are close to this, then it can be very difficult. So my strong recommendation would not be to build on a hard prediction of when will it become normal that everything is AI supported in the company and working together. However, I would heavily recommend not to start in 5 years, because this will overwhelm any company in terms of change resistance. So you have to start now so that you can ease into this new way of working over time, which creates much less resistance. And I think the technology is already there. I do not think that we are limited by what we have in terms of artificial intelligence. That will just get a lot better and make it much easier. But I think that we already have the rocket engine. We just don't have the space shuttle. And so this is now an engineering problem, in my opinion, and this will be solved.
All right. Just listening to your first part of your introduction, there was just things going through my mind about driving. I lived some years in Italy. I'm from the north. My honking rate is very different whether I'm in Italy or whether I'm in Denmark. So how do you kind of see this kind of adapting to culture of being it? Because most of AI we see now is uniforming things. And it also means if in 5 years we have this, all our business is let's say, more unified because kind of things roughly the same. At least there's a fear around it.
Yeah. There was a funny video from Audi about 10 years ago where they were driving in China, and they liked China even more than Italy in this example. They honked so much everywhere, and a car suddenly pulls in on the highway in front of the Audi. The Audi does an emergency braking with live television, and so I think this is the only reason this was published. And then the Audi engineer says, "Wow, so you see, this is the thing we can do right now." And what he meant also was adaptation to the local culture of how insanely you can actually drive in a different society. And for autonomous driving, this is one of the biggest problems. In the classical approach, there isn't really a good solution to how do you configure an autonomous car to work in different cultural environments. So normally you don't do that. The companies first release the car, for example, in Europe, and then they do it in the USA or the other way around. Typically, you don't do it at all markets at the same time because it's so complicated. However, with the breakthroughs in artificial intelligence 3 years ago, every autonomous driving system became outdated. Yep. And there's a growing convincement also that even the cars need to integrate these new changes because they can help adapt to your problem.
But you're just, let's say, a prime example of thinking different. So your company is encouraging and doing a lot of these kind of things with AI. So you're a little bit more crazy than other people, or a little bit more innovative, or a little bit more, let's say, smart in this way. So you are kind of using this and making that your cutting edge compared with some of your competitors, right? So how do you see that competitive landscape about either being totally maniac persons, sort of founder, starter, doing things, funny things that nobody ever trusts, maybe even AI doesn't trust. So how do you kind of see that being built in your next, let's say, 5 years?
For us, it's a very strange situation because we do not seem to have so many direct competitors. Because what we're doing is the exact opposite of any startup advice. Normally, a startup is supposed to pick a very narrow use case, so they would normally not do such a broad scope. On the other hand, the big companies, they typically have high-level goals, but then it splits down. At the bottom, you have a couple people in an IT team, and they say, I'm not here to save the company, I'm here to work on my small use case. So they have a very different way of solving the problems than we do. For us, we don't do use cases at all. We always ask ourselves, why does the use case not work out of the box with our solution? And then we empower the solution to solve that use case also out of the box. And that just continues to spiral upwards in terms of velocity. The general working principles translate also in other company types. I'm very happy to share our best practices with anybody who is interested, because I'm really trying to push here also the economy a bit.
All right, thank you. Thank you to Gereon. Applause to Gereon.
Thank you very much.